parable of the 10 virgins is a description of heaven based on a picture of Jewish culture. How is the kingdom of heaven like a special event in ancient Israel? Welcome to Word for the Week, Season 3, Episode 10. Join our discussion as we focus on the ancient traditions of a typical Jewish wedding, an event that paints the picture of heaven as told by Jesus. Jesus has taken us a long way in parables so far. He's told us that citizenship in the kingdom of heaven is based on what we are. And since we all fall short in that regard, he shared parables on personal transformation and then parables on gifting and purpose. So now what?
Well, now what? How we keep going and all that stuff. And at a quick glance, we can see that our parable for today is all about readiness, and actually readiness to the end. But as we study the details of the parable, I think we'll find out there's a whole lot more in it than just even that.
Well, let's start by reading the parable we're talking about.
Okay.
Matthew 25, 1 through 13.
You read, I'll drink.
Okay. At that time, the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. The foolish ones took their lamps, but didn't take any oil with them. The wise ones, however, took oils in jars along with their lamps. The bridegroom was a long time in coming, and they all became drowsy and fell asleep. At midnight, the cry rang out, "Here's the bridegroom, come out to meet him." Then all the virgins woke up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish ones said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil, our lamps are going out." "No," they replied, "there may not be enough for both us and you. Instead, go to those who sell oil and buy some for yourselves." But while they were on their way to buy the oil, the bridegroom arrived. The virgins who were ready went in with him to the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later, the others also came. "Lord, Lord," they said, "open the door for us." But he replied, "Truly I tell you, I don't know you. Therefore, keep watch, because you do not know the day or the hour." You say this parable is deeply embedded in ancient Jewish culture, so how was a wedding in that day different than our culture today?
Okay, yeah, let's do a walk through that, because I think it's really important for us to understand what's going on.
Sure.
And we can start with this. In our day, the wedding is all about who?
The bride.
Here comes the bride.
Right.
Well, in that day, the wedding was really all about the groom. So that's a starting point.
And based on what we found, walk us through a wedding in ancient Israel.
Okay, the wedding would kind of go like this, the whole process. First, you have the prospective groom who would then go to the prospective bride's house, or her father's house, really.
Right.
He'd negotiate with the father about, dowry, and actually him, in this case, the groom paying for the bride.
Right.
After all that negotiation was done and things were paid up, there was a covenant made, and they weren't married yet. That was just the betrothal. That was the contract was set.
Would Joseph and Mary, would that have been how their betrothal was?
Yeah, I imagine, because this would just been a normal thing of how it went down. And which, of course, if you know all this, and even you're right, the nativity, it takes on a whole new richness, doesn't it? So anyway, they would go, once the covenant was made, they were betrothed. At the end of the covenant making, they would have a drink of wine or share a cup among them in the betrothal. Then the groom would leave the bride's house, go back to his own father's house, and he would start building a house for them to live in, or perhaps a room, something. And traditionally, it would be attached to the father's house. And during the separation, they didn't keep meeting. During the separation, which could
Wanted
be
to keep up all the
keep the intrigue. This could be years. It wasn't just like, okay, and then next week. This could be years. During that separation, the bride would prepare her wardrobe that she would need for married life. They would dress differently as a married woman. She would prepare herself for married life. And at the same time, like we said, there would be the groom. He'd be preparing the accommodations. And the idea of many rooms at his father's house.
Well, that seems to be quite a parallel to the gospel story.
Yeah, it really is.
Huh. The church is called the bride.
Right.
Jesus paid the price for his bride, the church.
Right.
And he's gone back to the Father's house where he has many rooms, and he goes to prepare a mansion.
Mm-hmm.
And the bride, the church, is preparing for the groom's return.
Yep, so there you go. This beautiful parallel to the gospel story altogether.
Yeah.
Then came the invitations. So first there's that general invitation. Guess what? Kevin and Kathy are getting married. That's in the plans, things, and they know that this is going on. Second invitation goes out when it's getting very close and it's imminent. And in the first one, there's no date given, just that, hey, this is happening. And in the second one, there really isn't a date either. It's just that he'll be coming soon type of thing.
Just trying to picture that in today's.
Oh, yeah. Can you imagine? Yeah. Even if you put out something with a date 15 times at church, they still somehow people say, well, when is it? But anyway, I digress. They would get ready. Then in the second invitation, when the groom did come, then there would be this torchlight procession. And there was one commentator, scholar, explaining this from being in India where they had a similar thing go on. And he says, you wouldn't believe how regal, how impressive it is to see hundreds of torches.
Because they invited everybody, right?
Yeah, they invited everybody. And the procession would start at the bride's house. The groom would come to the bride's house, get the bride. That's where the bridesmaids come in. They were staying with the bride, and then they would escort. And then the whole village and whatever guests then would take a long way in the procession, a little bit like we do a funeral, really, when you think of it. They would take a long way, only much happier, to the new home where the bride and groom would live. And so everybody be in this procession.
Well, tell us about the procession.
Okay, so in this procession, like you were saying, the whole village being invited. As a matter of fact, there was a Jewish saying at the time, I guess, everyone from 6 to 60 to come out for the procession. So, you had just about everybody out there with a torch.
Okay, well, how about the 10 bridesmaids with the torches? How did they fit in?
Okay, as that works, the Talmudic tradition, and the Talmud being the practical teachings of the rabbis, suggested 10 bridesmaids be in a wedding ceremony. And so the average number, when Jesus pulled it, it just wasn't pulling it out of a hat. 10 was a traditional number for those. And they, like we said, be with her while she's waiting. Some writings say that when it was imminent, it was coming, they knew very soon. The bridesmaids and the bride, they'd stay dressed up because they wouldn't know the exact moment, so they'd be ready to jump up. But life would go on as normal. As you probably noticed in the parable, it said they were all sleeping. There was nothing wrong with them sleeping. You have to sleep.
You have to sleep,
yeah.
right.
So they were
Especially if you want to look good for your wedding.
yeah, you want to look good for the wedding, get your beauty sleep. But they were all waiting, and they were supposed to be prepared in such a way that dress, the torches, everything, they could pop up in a moment. And by the way, as we say that in there, it says trim lamps and all of that, but we'll see that that word means two different things. So anyway, they'd be ready with their torches.
In the parable, the groom comes at midnight. Was that a realistic portrayal?
Yeah, and surprisingly, it was so that midnight, actually, if we look through the Bible, midnight represents an unexpected hour throughout many stories in the Bible.
Well, it'd be unexpected.
Yeah.
I'd go along with that. I did a quick search and found a number of midnight events. In Exodus, God struck the firstborn of Egypt at midnight. In Judges, Samson took the doors of a city gate at midnight. It was midnight when Boaz found Ruth sleeping at his feet. Job spoke of the sudden passing away of people at the time of midnight. And of course, Jesus uses the idea of midnight.
Yeah, pretty much. And I have a theory of why midnight is such a thing. And it starts with this, the idea of people worked and slept by the sun, correct?
Right.
So I came up with this great Sherlock Holmes thought of coming up with this. So I looked at the Middle East to see when the average sunrise and sunset were, on the assumption that people go to bed when the sun goes down and get up when it comes up.
Right.
And the times are 7:20 basically and 7:20 p.m. and
Right.
5:30 a.m. For sunrise. So if you look at that mathematically, 12 o'clock, pretty much midnight falls almost to the minute in the middle of the night. So
That's cool.
people shouldn't be out running around then. It was a time for sleeping or whatever.
Whatever. So it's
It is. We're talking about a wedding, so
Right.
I got to throw that in.
so it's an unexpected hour for activity. How exactly did that play into the groom's coming?
Well, how that played into the groom's coming was like this. If you put yourself back, think you're in this ancient village in rural Israel. Life is pretty quiet. I mean, there's
Right.
not a whole lot of going on, not a whole lot of excitement.
Yeah.
So when they had weddings, they were a pretty big deal. You know,
That makes sense.
Something's happening.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, even in the tradition of this, the new bride and groom were actually celebrity status for that week or so as the wedding is being observed and going on, which usually the whole thing was about a week in festivities. So all the normal patterns of how you did life were kind of set aside for this special event.
Wow, like staying up past midnight.
Oh yeah, it's kind of like little kids, you know.
Yeah.
Do I get to stay up past midnight? So it wasn't that uncommon. As a matter of fact, very common that it would be a late night arrival of the groom to the bride's house, the village all waiting with their torches, and then they do this processional and probably get to the new couple's home around 3 a.m. or so in the morning.
Wow, and as I understand it, they didn't have a honeymoon like we do,
No.
but rather like a week-long open house at their new home, like you said, with everyone treating them like royalty. I just try to imagine that today, if everybody in our town, or even everybody at the lake,
Yeah.
knew us. For one thing, everybody knew us, and
Right.
everybody was invited, and were,
Doing
treating
this
us.
thing.
Yeah,
Treating you like royalty. Well, and remembering that most people probably didn't travel very far from their village,
True.
so they
Yeah.
were known their entire lives.
right.
And as a matter of fact, it's been said that they were even addressed as king and queen,
Oh, wow.
and that they're kind of like anything they wanted, goes, that type of thing. So it makes sense because one is they took marriage very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Marriage was for life, except for the most extreme conditions.
Right.
So the whole idea,
Unfortunately, not like today.
right, and it was married life in the time. It was a trudge. It was a long haul. So here the idea was to give them the best week of their life. A queen for a week, king for a week,
Right.
and then back to the usual quiet life.
Right.
And actually, I do have also a theory on the late arrival.
Okay, you're full of theories today.
Yes, I've been told I'm full of all kinds of things. Theories may be one of them.
Yeah.
But this is a solid one.
I'm not going to touch that.
Yeah, don't touch that one. Research, as we looked and cross-referencing, suggested that, that here was a chance to have a little bit of fun as, the tension rises, when's he coming,
Right.
when's he coming.
Right.
But I think socially there was a second motive, and it actually reflects in the parable, is that that's a rather inconvenient time, right?
Sure.
To
yeah.
be showing up. So you would find out kind of who was really your friend or not, who was really committed or not, because you know your friends who they really are when you put them kind of to the test. So
Right.
You're asking them to show support in this inconvenient time,
Yeah.
and so it's a way to find out who your friends really are.
Well, that makes sense. And to explain the groom's comment to the unprepared bridesmaids, I
Yeah.
don't know you. It would mean something like, you aren't the friends I thought you were.
Yeah, it really would kind of fit in there. And it was actually that I do not know you was actually a fairly compelling Hebrew expression that was used.
In Matthew 7:21 through 33, it's not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. I will tell them plainly, I never knew you.
Yeah, so there are times this is used.
Yeah. So much of this revolves around the oil and the lamps. So how would that resonate with the listeners of that day?
Well, the original Greek word was lampos, so there's our lamp.
Right.
But the thing about the word, it could mean a lamp like we understand it, an oil-fed lamp. But it could also mean a torch, something, that you lit. And here's the thing, is that people didn't use a lamp outside. It would be kind of like us, we want to go down. We got to go down and get our mail at night all the time on our long driveway.
Right.
It wouldn't go out with a candle. I would use a flashlight, right?
Right, because the slightest breeze would blow a candle out.
Exactly. And it would be this weaker flame too. It's great inside, but outside not so bright.
Right.
And if you ever try and blow a torch out, it's really not so easy.
All right, we've seen how Hollywood depicts ancient torches, but in reality, how did they make ancient torches?
Well, it's funny that you should ask, because
Do I need to have some fireproof clothing on? Yeah.
the 12-year-old me get all excited about today because I was going to start burning things. Let's start a fire and see if we can keep the house up. So I did. I made a miniature
So
torch.
cute.
Yeah, it is. This is baby torch, mini me.
And their torches, you had told me something that I thought was interesting. Besides all these people coming down the road with torches,
Yeah.
they'd be all decorated.
Yes.
So they were part of the
Yeah,
decor.
They're part of the decor. Yeah, kind of like candles down the aisle at
Right,
church.
right.
So they would do that. They would lick this. How they would make these is they had a material or a membrane that was like a gauze. So in order to make this recreation, I made a smaller version with gauze, and then the gauze would be soaked in a olive oil, probably. I mean, they're not going to have gasoline like we do today. Olive oil was the most common fuel that they would use for these. So.
Right, and we found it to be a highly efficient fuel with a clean flame, something like 99% efficient in its burning.
Yeah, I'm going to borrow a little bit of your
Yes,
tissue
it's
here.
dripping.
Yeah, it's just,
have a dripping
I
torch.
really load this down because I didn't want to be like the 10 virgins and get caught with my
The 5 that were.
the foolish five who
Foolish
didn't
five.
have their oil. So anyway, this is how it would be. It would have this gauze-like material wrapped around a pretty hefty stick, and the olive oil being the fuel. And so there's my mini torch. So here's kind of our indoor creation. We did have, some reason we have this little recreation of an oil lamp. I think you used to have this for burning incense.
Yeah.
But it's pretty creative. So we know how these lamps worked. They had a reservoir of oil in the bell, and then through this spout you would have a wick that would soak up the oil, and you would light it. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. Not done for 2,000 years. Here it is being lit. This is how an oil lamp would work. Now, pretty cool.
Yeah,
If you were in the house, you probably in a dark room, that's not a bad amount of light. But just for an experiment, let's you be the breeze. Yeah, I mean, it took you virtually nothing
Right.
to blow that out. And then you got the smoke. But we can see that on this long wedding
Yeah,
it would never
last.
never last. But the idea with the torch being with the soaked, very generous wrapping on the end. Let's give this a try. Here we are, Indiana Jones style. We're lighting our torch.
I couldn't believe when you said you were going to light gauze and it wasn't going to burn.
Yes, that's another part of it. So here's now. Try and blow that up. Yeah, see, you're going to end up doing
That's cool.
okay. So a good breeze. I'll try. Because I'm full of look at even me as the source of hot air can't blow it out.
Watch out. The sparks fly.
There's sparks everywhere. The wedding is proceeding. I'm going to just dip it in here so it doesn't
Yeah.
smell. But you get the idea of how this worked. Now, I don't know, it's probably drip a little on me, but I just want to put up. If we had this soaked, and like you were saying, I'm just holding this up to our camera a little bit. You see, yeah, sure, there's singeing on that, but the gauze itself didn't
Yeah,
really
the gauze
burn.
didn't burn.
So what would happen is if you were burning the oil off your material in the torch, it was good for, they'd say, about 15 minutes.
Right.
So you're on this processional. They take the long way to the house. It could be an hour's walk. So the only way you were going to have your torch for an hour is if you were carrying an extra supply of oil. So as they went along, essentially every 15 minutes, you would re-soak your torch into your oil pail or pot, whatever it is you happen to have. Then you were good for another 15 and so on until you went on for the entire trip. And like you said, where you keep it soaked in oil, you never did burn the material off of your torch.
Right. And so they'd carry a jar of oil with them if they were outside for any length of time. So
Right.
the 5 foolish ones, when the 15 minutes runs out, then the gauze burns, right?
Yeah, then you're going to be out of everything,
Yeah.
and you're not going to burn.
Right.
So oil was necessary, and so the whole scenario that Jesus sets up with this wedding parable, it's genius in the way that it's an extremely realistic situation that everybody listening would have understood.
Right. So having a soaked torch and a reserve of oil would really be a basic preparation. And in modern terms, it would be like a person having batteries for a flashlight that they knew they'd be using for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, if you were going out for a long hike or hiking for the weekend, I mean, what person with their flashlight would, pack some extra batteries?
Right, right.
So you get where Jesus is going. It wasn't just a small afterthought. These foolish bridesmaids actually messed up on the most basic preparation in the day. That people would be going, how could they, be that foolish
Right.
to miss something so basic?
And then the unprepared bridesmaids finally catch up at the groom's house where the party's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And what's happening there?
Then there's a picture where it fits tradition well, and this too. If you weren't in the procession, you really didn't have a right to participate at the new house in the festivities. And so the idea that people who didn't make the procession got turned away is not surprising. As a matter of fact, when the procession got to the house, was the idea, close the doors, whoever's in, let's party down.
All the people that were invited, like the whole town, so they would have to be ready to, at a moment's notice, to get out there and be in the procession too, right?
They would, and like we say, if it's this unexpected thing, you would find out who your real friends were in town.
Right. I just try to imagine that. It's just,
Well, yeah, it's like you say. So if you had all these people coming, and if the
Right.
bridesmaids consider you, if the whole town's invited, if you were a bridesmaid in
Yeah.
this situation,
Yeah.
you had quite a place of honor, much like today. I don't think it's a lot different that way.
Yeah.
So here you have these 10 young women who are in a place of honor.
right.
5 of them don't even make the most basic preparation. So you got to wonder how much they really cared, right?
Right.
And then so it's a double faux pas. They're unprepared for the procession, which is a
Right.
main thing. Then they show up at the house and try and crash the party, right?
Right.
So I mean, you can just imagine all the people who are listening to the story, just sitting there and inwardly cringing, like, oh,
Yeah.
I can't believe they did that.
Yeah.
So
A real break in etiquette.
etiquette, yeah, it was a double offense, very cringeworthy. So.
Wow. And that's what professing believers were doing to God. What's so cringeworthy to the kingdom of heaven that Jesus illustrates in this way?
Right, because that's what he's getting at.
Yeah,
He wanted to
right.
tell a cringing story to point something out. And in a line would say this, that really would have hit them hard, is the idea, if you don't care enough to prepare, you don't care.
Yeah.
If we don't really care enough to prepare. Where are we really with God? So the parable illustrates really God saying, you're demonstrating, you're living out that you don't care about me, you don't know me, so I am saying I don't know you. The door's closed.
This explaining it all this way really hit me, and it makes me think of Matthew 10:33. But whoever
Right.
denies me before men, him I also will deny before my Father in heaven.
Yeah, that whole idea of denial, it fits, it certainly does.
Yeah.
And the original word for deny that you're mentioning in there, too, a loaded word, it means to renounce or reject something desired or valuable. So, and that's what's going on. In effect, by not being ready, they renounced the value, they rejected the value of the groom and the bride. And so in the picture, that's how it's painted. It was a very foolish thing for them to do.
I find that really interesting because this parable isn't directed at non-believers. These
Right.
virgins are participants in God's wedding feast. They're
Yeah.
expected to be there.
Yeah.
And the parable's not about good or bad or believing or not believing. It's about being foolish or wise.
Yeah, it's a real better stop and think about it type of moment in this.
Right.
So I'm trying to get in one last Greek word
Of course.
because there's never enough Greek words. It's kind of like eating. I just love garlic. It's never enough garlic. The Greek word for foolish is a loaded word. And now it can mean, like we say, dull or stupid. How can you be so stupid? We say that. But when we use a word like that, we don't really mean stupid in the clinical sense, a lack of raw intelligence. You can be foolish and very intelligent, right?
Right.
It's foolish in the way that these women, or the word as it would be, they're heedless. This is, if you look it up in a concordance, a dictionary from the Greek, heedless, imprudent, without forethought, negligent, empty, useless, absurd. I love one commentator uses the word blockhead. I thought that was great. These girls, they were just blockheads, Kath. Blockheads.
Well, we'll see how this applies on Sunday, but as far as our discussion today, here's my bottom line.
Okay.
Dun-dun.
The bottom line, Kathy's bottom line.
The ancient Jewish wedding parallels the gospel story. Christ will return for his bride, the church. How much we value God is demonstrated in how seriously we take our own readiness. And our readiness is symbolized by the torches soaked in oil. And
Right.
since oil is a symbol of the Holy Spirit,
Right.
readiness involves our relationship with the Holy Spirit.
That's a really...
Sound good?
Yep, sounds good.
Thanks. I look forward to
You're
the Sunday
welcome.
follow-up.
Me
But
too.
for now, we leave you with something a little special. Here's the praise team singing a cappella, the hymn classic, How Deep the Father's Love.
Do you think we should bring bigger torches on Sunday and really drive it home?
Enjoy and be blessed, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
How deep the Father's love for us, how vast beyond all measure, that He would give His only Son to make a wretch's treasure. How great the pain of searing loss! The Father turns His face away, as wounds which mar the chosen one bring many sons to glory. Behold the man upon a cross, my guilt upon his shoulders. Ashamed, I hear my mocking voice call out among the scoffers. It was my sin that held him there until that it is finished. I will not boast in anything. No gifts, no powers, no wisdom. But I will boast in Jesus Christ, His death and resurrection. What should I gain from His reward? I cannot give an answer, but this I know with all my heart. His wounds have paid my ransom. What should I gain from His reward? I cannot give an answer, but this I know with all my heart. His wounds have paid my ransom, but this I know with all my heart. His wounds have paid my ransom.
You can watch Word for the Week at canancommunity.org. You can also catch our live stream on Canaan Community's Facebook, YouTube, or your favorite podcast app.